Hey there friends and enemies, Jopa here again, and today I figured I would share my Season 1 tier list in Marvel Rivals with a few things to keep in mind that I always mention in these types of videos. One, I do these tier lists for fun. You can argue in the comments if you want to. It's fun to have this debate back and forth, but don't think of this as this is the best character no matter what, whatever the case may be. Sometimes, as I made another video about, tier lists don't matter. You can look at a character who is a B tier character and they could be a better fit for a certain situation than an S tier character. So just understand that, understand team compositions, play style, and all that kind of good stuff. Another thing to keep in mind, if I rank your favorite character too low, don't take that to heart. Sometimes playing a character who is not S tier is more enjoyable in my opinion anyway, but just know that every character is usable across most ranks in this game, whereas a few of them just really honestly struggle once you get to the upper echelon. So keeping that in mind, let's go through the list and I'll talk about some of the pros and cons for each of them. Starting off with Adam Warlock. He is a strategist who I think is very good in the right situation, but I think some of the more defensive ults that are able to counter other offensive ultimates like a Luna Snow, a Mantis, you even have Invisible Woman and Cloak and Dagger now. I think that's why he is down a little bit lower on the list for me personally, just because while his res can be very, very good, I think ultimately his healing is tricky for a lot of players to use, and even at the higher ranks, I feel like while his burst damage is very, very good, some of his healing can be a little bit up and down, and he doesn't work in every team comp like some of the other strategists in the game. So I'm going to put him right at B tier. I think he's very good, but I do think ultimately there are others who outshine him at this particular moment. Then we move on to Black Panther. He is a character that at the top level, when you get a really good Black Panther on your team, or against you, then it can be an absolute masterclass. You can see that player destroying the lobby. The unfortunate part is he has a lot of counters, and pretty much every character in this game does have counters, so there's no player you can play no matter what, regardless of team composition. And I think him right now will struggle a little bit because you will see a Mantis sleep him oftentimes. You'll have a other defensive characters like a Namor able to drop some turrets and really control the area if you have a insane Black Panther. And so because of that, I think he's an A tier right now. Again, very, very good in a lot of situations. However, there are easy counters to him that can take him out. And especially now that some of the nerfs and buffs have happened and we see some other characters rising or dropping in the meta as well. Black Widow is one of those who I think is still not good enough. I think she's in C tier. I would have put her down in D, but I think she's improved a bit beyond that. She is a usable character in some situations, and in the right hands against the right opposition, she can be very good. But the problem is, for me, there's a lot of other characters who do what she does just a bit better still at this particular point. So that's why she's going to drop down just a bit, and I think she is, again, usable in certain situations, but I don't think there's ever been a point in time where I'm playing against a Black Widow that I'm really worried about it, or where I'm playing with a Black Widow that I am excited to see them on my team, especially when you're in competitive. And so until she kind of rises above some of the other competition for her space, I think she just drops down quite a bit, and that's why she's going to be in C tier. Now we'll get to some interesting characters. First off, we have Captain America, who I think is now a lot better than people give him credit for, and even though his buff wasn't a lot, he doesn't do a lot of damage. That's not always necessarily going to be his role. He is kind of a nuisance along the back line, but also his survivability is pretty insane, and he does counter some characters who can be frustrating to play with. You can run him at for example, a Punisher or a Winter Soldier and really isolate them so they can't do as much damage. Again, when he's facing off against a Namor or characters who can shoot him from multiple different angles, he can really struggle there, but I think ultimately he's a lot better than he was, and his team up with Thor is actually insane, and if he gets a bit of a buff, I could see him eventually going in A tier. Another big problem with him is he is somewhat frustrating to use, especially because, again, you compare him to other tanks who are trying to kind of get into the enemy backline, like a Venom or a Hulk specifically. Hulk does it better than he does, and because of that, he's going to drop down just a little bit, but I do think he's a lot better than people give him credit for. Now we get to some S tier characters in, first of all, Cloak and Dagger. My personal favorite strategist for climbing, going from bronze to platinum at the least. She can be effective across every single skill range in those levels. She can do the job. If you're not a good strategist, she's excellent because of her auto healing. She gets her ultimate back very, very fast. Now she can heal additionally with that fourth swipe across the land with her ultimate as well. And I just think overall she is in a really, really good spot and benefits, I think, from some easy team ups in, especially with Moon Knight, where you can utilize her effectively. Moon Knight is another good character for climbing, and even at the highest level, when you see a Luna band or you see a Mantis band, she's an easy choice, even though Invisible Woman is there as well and is also very, very good. I think especially we're seeing it now with a triple strategist meta that is kind of forming among certain competitive ranks, and so because of that, I think Cloak and Dagger is very, very good, and I think while she is counterable, like for example, you could use a Magneto ult to take her out of her ult, I do think she is pretty reliable as a strategist, and someone that if you are filling a lot in ranked, in competitive, she can be the best healer to go to because she is so easy to use and because she can provide so much value with relatively little effort. Then we have Doctor Strange. I think he is still S tier. His combination with Hulk and Iron Man is absolutely insane. That is probably, in my opinion, the best team up still this season, even though people have started to counter it. And because people have started banning Hulk quite a bit and they started banning some other characters, so we now see a Hela and Hawkeye potentially in games, I think you are seeing that team up just drop down just a little bit. I still think it's probably the best in the game, but it is a lot closer than it used to be, even though it is very, very effective. Then we have Groot, and Groot is another who I think is very, very good. In the right hands is excellent. I just think there's certain times where he can get absolutely obliterated when you are facing the wrong team ups. And that's why I'm going to put him in A tier. I think he's above Captain America though. So I'm going to rank these. Not only am I ranking these by where they belong here, D through S, but I'll also put them in the order I think they are as far as how good they are as a character. But anyway, Groot can be very effective. His survivability, if you use his walls correctly, if you're able to stay near them, gain that bonus health, gain that additional damage when enemies are pushing in. But I think what he suffers from is the current meta and just the ability to use an Iron Man or other character to burn him down. You have Punisher, you have other characters who can delete him potentially if he isn't getting pocketed completely, and so because of that, I think he's A. I know a lot of people would disagree and say he's S, but for me, he's up there as a really good tank, but one who I don't think is the best, especially because when I'm comparing tanks, so you will likely only see two, maybe sometimes three if you're playing kind of a GOATS meta, but I want to look at only so many tanks can be S tier, and I think there are others who are still ahead of him right now, and that's why I'm going to put him into A. Then we have Hawkeye and Hela, and I'm very honest in that the next four characters are all A or S. They're all very, very good. You got Hawkeye, Hela, Hulk, and then Invisible Woman. And the problem for me is that while I think they're very good, I think Hawkeye especially is a little bit overrated right now. He can be absolutely destructive in the right team setup, but I do think he's also able to get countered. Again, when I was talking about Captain America running at him constantly, when I'm talking about Hulk in the back line and he's not able to get off his shots consistently, I'm going to be honest and I'm going to put him at A tier. This might be questionable. This is one that, again, he could be S tier, but I think he's lost a little bit of value, but there's also so many more ways to counter him that people know about that I think he drops down just a bit, and that's why I'm going to put him in A tier. Again, for my ranking specifically, I want to keep it a little bit more evenly distributed. I saw some other tier lists so far this season that have a whole ton of S tier characters, and I don't really like that because it feels like it undervalues what S tier should be. Hela, though, she is S tier. Hulk is also S tier in my opinion, and I think Invisible Woman is S tier, although I actually put her below Cloak and Dagger personally, but it is very, very close. Anyway, going through them one by one. Hela is still insanely good. Probably the best DPS in the game still, especially with no team-ups. You can put a team up with her. You can run a composition of an insane combo, in my opinion, that a lot of people I don't think are using, but you can run a full team-up combination of Hela, Thor, Storm, Captain America, and then maybe a Loki as a healer, and then another support in there as well. And it's oppressive to play against. I know a lot of people don't like running Captain America. They don't think Thor and Cap can solo tank or can tank because they don't have a hard shield like a Doctor Strange or a Magneto. But I think that combination is insanely effective in the right hands, and one that I wouldn't be surprised if it starts rising up the ranks and you start seeing it all the more often. Hulk is a character a lot of people undervalued last season because they just didn't understand how to use him. But by the end of the season, once people really maximized his effectiveness and people really started to learn, okay, you can jump into your team, use his shield in order to block enemy ultimates, in order to sustain your team, keep them alive, he is actually insane. Plus, his team up with Iron Man is one of the most broken that we've had so far in the game, and it makes Iron Man a significantly better character with that team up. Not only that, but you pair him with Doctor Strange, and that combination is also very nuts because Doctor Strange is already insanely good, and Hulk now buffs him even more. So that combination is just wild and does so much damage, so much work that I feel like it is one that eventually we'll see toned down, in my opinion, just because of how effective it is. Then we get to Invisible Woman. She can be very, very good, but I still think people overrate her just a little bit. Her shields are very effective, but because they're stationary, they are more effective against some characters than others. You also have her healing, which is the boomerang, but doesn't have the range of some other healers in the game right now. And her ultimate, I think, is more counterable than the other three defensive ultimates in the game. And while you go invisible, you can launch a Iron Man ultimate in there. You can use other ultimates that I think can absolutely destroy the people inside. And I just think her ultimate is, because it's stationary as well, it doesn't allow for pushing into zones nearly as well as Luna Mantis or even a Cloak and Dagger, as you can beeline it right into the new area. Whereas hers, she has to get on the zone first or get into the capture point before she can use her ultimate. Again, she's very effective. She got good survivability with the ability to go invisible. She can do a lot of damage too if the other teams are not careful. Her push and pull, I think, is almost what separates her and why I would almost put her above Cloak and Dagger, because you can knock people off of the map. You can push like a Doctor Strange using his Eye of Agamotto back away from your team and save the entire squad. There's a lot of that is very, very effective. But again, I don't think that makes up for some of the other benefits from other healers we currently have in the game. Iron Fist. He's a character that I have seen go absolutely nuts, and the fact that he's able to fly around and take out Iron Man brings him a little bit more value than I think people would give credit for. I just think he is like Black Panther, only worse, and is counterable in a lot more ways. Plus, he can destroy teams that aren't as good and aren't as organized, but really struggles against cohesive, organized teams where he gets into the backline and starts swinging, but then almost can't stop himself and doesn't find himself escaping nearly often enough. I'm going to put him above Black Widow, but I'm going to put him at C tier. Again, I think he's good. I think he can provide a lot of value at the lowest levels in the game, but ultimately, he just doesn't make life as easy. Like, if you're running a brawler or backline type attacking character, there's just way better options in the game currently, especially when you look at a character like a Magic, who is very good, or Star-Lord, who isn't a melee character, but is just more effective at flanking and heavy damage than someone like a Iron Fist will be. So that's why he drops down quite a bit. Then we got Iron Man. I think I'm going to put him right below, right here in A tier. Iron Man is very good. Now that we see less bans against Hela and Hawkeye, they're pretty good counters to him. Punisher is also a pretty decent counter, but I think that the strategists are the ones that should probably focus on him a little bit more often than what I see in a lot of my games. When you have a Luna Snow or a Mantis, they are going to be the best characters for countering a Iron Man. Yes, you don't want to be using them primarily and not healing often enough, but Mantis should be dealing a lot of damage anyway, and you can take him out of the sky while throwing a healing orb on your team and then do a bunch of damage to generate more orbs for you to use as well. And so for that reason, he is a character who can be oppressive, but again, he needs the right team composition, the right support. He's not universally good and destructive against every team and in every team composition. That's why I drop him down a little bit. And I think he's fine. I think he's really good. But with Hulk Band, you're just not going to see him all that often at the top ranks. And at the lower ranks, a lot of people aren't good enough with him to be oppressive. Sometimes it'll happen, but not all the time. So anyway, moving on, we have Jeff the Land Shark. I think he is probably the worst healer in the game, in my opinion. He can heal a lot. I'm going to put him at C tier. He can do a lot of healing, and ultimately he's not a bad choice in every situation. There's a Jeff the Land Shark on high ranked PC who's absolutely bananas, and I think he's another character that could rise up as people learn how to do his little pop, bubble, dash away, do a bunch of damage because his damage is very good, heal your team, but you need a reliable healer with him in order for him to be successful if you play in that style as more of a flanker. But he also needs to be able to not just heal by, and that's really where he doesn't have the flexibility of a lot of the other healers on your team. Plus, now it's become easier, especially as you rise up the ranks, to find ways to counter his ultimate so he's not eating the entire squad. You know, if Jeff is on the other team, you likely shouldn't be grouped up all on the point anyway. Maybe you one tank or one Vanguard or something of that nature. And so for that reason, he drops down quite a bit. And especially now that his ult is more visible, I just don't think it's nearly as oppressive. So I think he's C tier. I wouldn't be surprised, though, if we see him rise up, if we get nerfs to any of the other strategists, or we start to see people use him in a different way, say, in this current 3 strategist meta that we see across different in different comps. If you have a 3 strategist comp, you can use him a little bit more aggressively, still heal your team, but also get some picks as well, because that's what's necessary if you're running that type of a setup. Then we have Loki. Loki is super fascinating to me because I think in the right hands, he's the best strategist in the game, but oftentimes he falls short in comparison to the others. I'm going to put him high A tier. And the reason for that is, again, while he's very good, I've played with some teams. If I have a combination of Loki, Adam Warlock, and Rocket Raccoon on my team, I don't know if I have two of those three, I don't know if I've ever won a game with them as my primary strategists. And the reason for that is a lot of people really struggle to use his totems to save your teammates. The enemy team, as you get to higher levels, starts shooting the clones, starts shooting the totems, and he loses a lot of that effectiveness. That being said, his ability to copy an ult, say you want to have double Luna ults essentially, can be very, very valuable. If you use him correctly and are able to set him up at spots, like if you're a smart player, putting him in the right vantage points, he can be very, very good to do damage and also heal your team. So I think he can be very good. A really good Loki on your team is an insane bonus, but unfortunately there are also some that are just not very good, and that's where he struggles just a bit. Moving on, we have Luna Snow, who I think is still S tier, and top 2 strategist in the game. She is insanely good and one of those characters who is usable across all different playstyles, team compositions, skill levels. You can not necessarily rely on her healing as much as Cloak and Dagger if you have a player who can't aim at all. But even then, she's got a lot of value, and I think she's very, very good. Now, ultimately, she's got the counter to dive characters with her freeze, although it can be finicky to hit certain characters. Black Panther as he's dodging, for example. You also have the fact that she has her ultimate, which is insane, and only has a few counters in the game. Then you have the fact that her healing output is very, very good, and she can dish out a sizable amount of damage on top of healing. I think she's excellent and one of those characters who is universally good right now, so much so that I wouldn't be surprised if she gets a nerf. The top list of the S tier characters, probably the top 4 or 5 characters, are the ones that I can see getting a nerf at some point, and that's because of how good they are. And because of how good they are, they kind of outshine some of the other options. So that's why I wouldn't be surprised if they got a little bit of an adjustment. And Luna Snow is incredible. If we just saw, for example, the strategist ultimates like Luna Snow, Mantis, Invisible Woman, and Cloak and Dagger, if they got a longer cooldown, we might see things change up quite a bit. I think that would be the most likely change that we see as far as a nerf. Then we get to Magic. Magic is really good in the right hands and, again, counterable in the wrong ones pretty easily. She's one I struggle with. I think Black Panther is better than her at this particular time, so I'm going to put her in a B tier. This is one, again, I'm kind of struggling with a little bit. I like to compare like for like characters, so if we're looking at Iron Fist, Magic, and then Black Panther, that's the order that I would personally put them, and I think that's how their effectiveness goes. Now, does that mean that a good Black Panther or a good Black Panther character player will beat a excellent Magic player? No. Magic can be very, very good. She can be very impressive. And I've seen some games where she absolutely dominates. There's a lot of players at high levels that play her very, very well. I just think personally that the gap between the good players and the not so good players with her is so much wider than with Black Panther. That's why I have her in B tier, even though, again, she can be very, very good. She is very reliant on combinations as well, and I think because of that, I'm going to stick her into the B tier. Again, I think she's excellent, but yeah, just doesn't quite do as much as some of the other options for me personally. Then we have Magneto, and he's such a hard one. I think he's got the best survivability of any tank, and if Scarlet Witch was better, he would be absolutely insane. His team up with her, he does so much more damage and can be absolutely insane, doing damage and also shielding himself and shielding his teammates. However, because Scarlet Witch is not very good, that's why Magneto drops down a bit compared to like Doctor Strange and Hulk. He's still very good. You're still going to see him all the time. His ability to survive with his shield as well as his barrier is very good. And ultimately, I think they are pretty neck and neck. I think Doctor Strange, because Hulk is so good this season, drops or goes ahead of Magneto by just a bit because that combination is just flat out better. But if you run a Doctor Strange Magneto comp, it can be very difficult to break down if you have decent healers, and you don't even need them to be 100% on that game. So that's why I think he's very good, but I think he's maybe not quite as good as Doctor Strange or some of the other options right now because of that. Then we get to Mantis, who I am going to also put in S tier. Her and Luna Snow, in my opinion, are neck and neck. And so for that reason, I think she is just fantastic. She can do a lot of damage. She takes a little bit more time to get used to as far as how to utilize her abilities best. You want to be buffing yourself at all times. You want to buff your teammates. You want to throw a heal on them, not when they're one shot. That's the problem that I see with a lot of Mantis players. She doesn't have the burst healing that other characters have. You want to be using her heal over time earlier in the fight when the character takes some damage, so that way you can then dish out some more damage, regenerate your healing, and then use it once again in a short amount of time. The more damage you do and output, the more you're able to heal your teammates and buff your teammates as well. So that's why it's so valuable to not only just be heal botting on a character like Mantis. And so I think she is insanely good and still just as good as last season. You'll oftentimes see either a Luna Snow or Mantis banned because those two are just so dominant right now, and it's easy if you ban one of them to avoid a triple strategist setup. Mr. Fantastic is a character who I'm not sure exactly where to rate right now. He feels like a duelist tank, but you wonder if some of the other full tanks should be used instead of him at times. He doesn't necessarily do enough damage. I will say his survivability in the right hands is absolutely insane. And so if you're contesting a point, he is invaluable. But I do feel like he does fall off quite a bit. I think he's like Wolverine, one of those characters who a lot more people will see is better than they think by the end of the day. And so that's why I'm going to put him not in D tier, but I'm going to put him right here and see. I think he's right here. He's above Black Widow, but maybe below Iron Fist, right about there. Again, he's one that I could see us finding out some different tech for him as Invisible Woman really starts to shine. She's also already very good. Her team up with Mr. Fantastic is good. And then if we see the Thing or Human Torch team up with him and be a very good combination, now all of a sudden he could rise up the ranks as well. But for now, he's going to go right there. Then we get to Moon Knight. Moon Knight absolutely destroys lower ranks, and I think falls off quite a bit at higher ranks. And if I'm looking at these other duelists that I have ahead of him, I wouldn't put him on the same tier as them. That's why he drops down. Good Moon Knights can absolutely take over games, especially in lower comp and quick play, because of how good he can be in controlling areas. But his ultimate is avoidable, especially if you have, for example, Cloak and Dagger, who's able to shield. You have ultimate that's able to get you out of danger. There's a lot of ways to avoid that, and while he can be very, very annoying, I think the other characters, like I said, on the list higher than him are a bit better. That doesn't mean he's terrible, that doesn't mean he's bad, nothing like that, but I think he's just not quite as good as those other options. His Ankh is destroyable if you're paying attention. You shouldn't even be targeting his Ankh in most cases. It's easier to target the enemy players, and it still ricochets. That's something people don't know, which is kind of insane to me. You can ricochet your shots, not just off his Ankh. So keep that in mind going forward. Then we have Namor. I think Namor is going to be the highest of A. I almost want to put him in S. He's my favorite duelist for climbing right now. If you get a Luna Snow duo and a Namor, absolutely oppressive, because you got the 3 turrets, if you're able to hit some decent shots with his tridents as well, he can be insanely good and very annoying. Not only that, but you can use him against basically any other comp in the game. You can use him to handle dive teams. You can use him to take out an Iron Man in the air, especially if you put your turrets close enough. The downside, though, is that it's a little bit harder to be offensive with him on certain maps, on like Convoy or Escort the Payload, because you constantly have to be tossing your turrets forward. You can't really hold down a spot nearly as well. I do think his survivability with his ability to go in that water bubble is very, very good. So that's why he's going to be very high A. But he does have some drawbacks, whereas like Hela really doesn't, as long as you're hitting your shots. So that's why he's just a little bit lower. I do think he's better than Hawkeye right now, and that might be something of a hot take. Penny Parker. This is one of the most controversial characters. I have absolutely abused Penny Parker in my climb up the ranks at various times because of how effective she is, especially when you're facing off against a Black Panther, an Iron Man, or a Magic One Trick, for example, Iron Fist One Trick. Any of those brawl characters, or if we have like a Venom constantly diving us, if we have anything like that, can be absolutely countered easily with a Penny Parker. She is still good at certain levels, at certain ranks, depending on how many choke points there are and how effective she is at controlling that. That being said, I do understand her flaws. I do understand that she is a character that I personally love. I have, besides Doctor Strange, I think I have the second most hours in Penny in the game, and she's insanely effective. But I just think she is not quite to the level of a Groot or any of the S tier tanks, in my personal opinion. Even though I wish that was not the case, I do think she is potentially very good. She has some very good usage, but if the other team is shooting her spider nest, if the other team is aware of where she's controlling the area and able to avoid that, then she can be easily deleted against the right team ups. And too often, what the most frustrating thing, I almost always use Penny when I'm on defense, and I almost never use her on offense. Far too many people are using Penny Parker on offense, and it is unnecessary because she does not provide value. Yeah, you might get some kills. Yeah, you might have some success, but you're not really able to push into the enemy team as you would with a Strange, a Magneto, a Hulk, or even a Thor or somebody like that. So that's why Penny Parker drops down just a little bit for me. But I still think, again, she's very, very good, very fun. Then we have Psylocke. Psylocke is another interesting one who I think is insanely good. I'm tempted to put her in S tier, but I don't know if she's on the level of the other duelists that I see in the game right now. So I am personally going to put her into high A. I think she's better overall than Namor, but not quite as good as some of the other options in the game. So that's why she drops down just a little bit. And so because of that, I think, again, her flanking is very good. Her damage output can be pretty solid, but her kill potential is what's really good. She can get in, get a couple kills against the backline, and get out, and isn't necessarily challenged as much as like a Black Panther or a Magic, as far as like if someone has an anti-dive comp, they are able to hard counter those characters, whereas Psylocke can still contribute, can still be effective against that anti-dive composition that the other characters really struggle with. So she can go invisible, get to a different flanking spot. She can still do damage from range, and I think she just has far more versatility. I would put her in S tier, but I just think there's one other character who I think is better and deserves S tier, and I think I don't want to overload S tier with a bunch of different characters. So moving on, we have Rocket Raccoon, who I think is, oh, this is hard. I've seen some good rockets. They can put out really good healing, and I think is right below Adam Warlock. His ultimate is so tricky because I think it can be very effective in certain situations, but it's mostly against teams who cannot handle that, who aren't ready for an insane output of damage. Him combined with a Winter Soldier and a Punisher is absolutely devastating to teams that don't know how to play cover and keep their lives and just avoid the damage. The problem is that it's very stationary, right? His ultimate, the buff that he gives to Winter Soldier and Punisher, Punisher himself is very stationary at times with his turret. And so because of that, in certain situations where you're constantly needing to move points or you're trying to take a point or something like that, he can struggle just a little bit. He can output a lot of healing with his heal bot, just spamming his orbs, and he can do a lot of damage if you focus on that. I don't think he can do both at the same time, as well as Magic or Luna especially, and I don't think his ultimate is good enough to make him worthy of a pick in comparison to the other strategists in the game, and that's why he's going to be B tier. He is better than Jeff, in my opinion, though. Then we're going to get to, unfortunately, probably the worst character in the game as of right now, and that is Scarlet Witch. And this pains me not because I play her, I don't at all, but because I would love to have her on my squad more, because I would love to play Magneto as my main tank. I think he's my favorite tank when I have the Scarlet Witch buff. And unfortunately, that doesn't happen often enough because she is not very good. People will argue with this, but I think she is, unfortunately, the most counterable duelist in the game, in my opinion. And there's a lot of times where what she does is not good enough. Like, she doesn't have enough range and doesn't do enough damage. So you could use a ranged character, like you could use Psylocke to do everything she does significantly better. And so that's really where her struggle. I think Psylocke's ultimate significantly better than Scarlet Witch. You could use Star-Lord. You could use basically any flank character better than you can use Scarlet Witch. Her ultimate is the easiest one to take down in the entire game. I've done it with virtually every character. You can do it with a Penny Parker and the web. You can shoot her out of it. It's just one of those where she's the one character that desperately needs a buff. Now, I will say, playing with her when I am playing Magneto and I'm able to shield her, for example, when she's using her ultimate, can be very effective against lower ranks, but once you get to the high ranks, she is just almost unusable to a degree that is very, very unfortunate. Then we have Spider-Man. This is going to be potentially a hot take, but I think Spider-Man is C tier. Again, B tier. I'll put him in B tier. The reason for this, I've seen like Necros and some of these other players who are absolutely insane with Spider-Man. But I think he is the worst character in the game in the wrong hands. And too often, I've been burned personally by having so many Spider-Man players on my team who have no idea what they are doing and are struggling the entire game. They're flanking, they're 8 and 6 or they're 6 and 8, and they're constantly waiting for the right spot. They're waiting to get their pick. They're trying to do TikTok clips of pulling, RP TikTok by the way, pulling players off the map, but they're not providing any value, and that's where I struggle the most with Spider-Man. I just think he is very good in the right hands, but he is counterable, and he also is incredibly frustrating to have on your team at times. And so that might be a little bit of bias from me, but I don't care. I think actually I'm going to put him back. I'm putting him in C tier. I don't care if people can run him and be absolutely insane with him. I think he is a character who is not as good as the other options we have in the game, and so I'm going to put him in C tier and stick to my guns. I think he is better than like Iron Fist and Mr. Fantastic and Black Widow, but that doesn't mean a whole lot when I still think he's kind of buns. Squirrel Girl. This is going to be another hot take. I think she's good. Her ultimate now is very, very oppressive when you are facing a stationary team that doesn't have their ultimate. She can hold down defensive angles very easily and just do insane chunks of damage. One of the things that I think is underrated at times from her is her ability to do just insane chunk damage to strategists specifically. And if you can essentially two-shot a strategist, if you catch them in your stun and then you're able to knock them down, she's good against dive characters because as they try to dive you, she can use her stun. She can reload and get a second stun. If you miss, she can jump away while reloading her stun to get another one. And I think she just does a lot of damage. Now, and while ultimately at the higher levels, I do think she struggles at time because she's easy to pick off from characters like a Star-Lord, like Iron Man, like a Storm, that kind of leaves her a little bit stuck in place almost. You know, she's not able to deal with those characters much. If we had a brawl meta or a meta of that was more grounded, I think if we had a lot of characters who were more stationary, then she would be a lot better. But I think she can provide insane value in certain situations, and so because of that, I think she is low B tier and is definitely usable. I think more people should have a character like Squirrel Girl on their radar when they are in the right situation to toss her into the mix and just really be annoying to the other team and hold them off from getting the point, getting the area that they're trying to get to. And it can be very, very effective even if she's not good for universal situations. Then we have two insane duelists this season in Star-Lord and Storm. Now, this is, again, I think I'm going to put Star-Lord in A tier and I'm going to put Storm in S tier. I think she is insanely valuable. Okay, so let me go through these one by one. So, Star-Lord. He is very good in the right hands. He can dodge ultimates. He can keep himself alive very good. He's got the team up with Adam Warlock and Mantis, which can be very effective for getting additional lives. But I do think that he is a character who you have to be able to provide a lot of value with and get a lot of picks. Whereas Psylocke, I think, can be more annoying at different ranges and in different situations. Hela, I think, is just more universally good. Storm, I think, is more universally good. So because of that, I think that's the only reason I drop him down a little bit. Again, very effective, very good character. One of those who, when you have an excellent Star-Lord, can decimate a match. His ultimate can destroy teams. But again, when you face off against teams who know what they're doing, you can either use your shields, whether it's Strange or whether it is Magneto. You can use ultimates to counter through his ultimate. You can also kill him out of it fairly easily as he's flying around. So I do think that if the team is aware of his ultimate, it's not as devastating. But if you're a team who doesn't look up in the sky, he can absolutely destroy everybody. Then we move on to Storm, who I think is valuable for several reasons. One, if you have a team comp of, for example, a Doctor Strange and a Magneto, and you can stay in behind your shield tanks, she is insanely good. She provides a buff of damage to everyone in the area. She can do a lot of damage. She does AoE damage, so if everyone on the other team is within radius, they'll be taking damage over time. She has R1 or right click ability that can essentially do heavy chunks of damage that has an AoE effect. And so because of that, I think she's just insanely valuable across so many teams, and her damage buff is very effective and could be the difference between you winning and losing a team fight, because you can sometimes just out damage the enemy team's healing. So I think she is really, really good and one of those characters who provides value even if you're not getting the most kills on the team. And because of that, is a character who you can use this season after being one of the worst characters previously, who you can use to climb up the ranks pretty easily. And so because of that, I think she's excellent. I think she's a character that everybody should try to learn how to play, and I think she is one of those characters who I absolutely love. Like I mentioned earlier, too, her team up with Thor and Captain America is also very, very good, and so I would definitely recommend using them if at all possible. Then we have the Punisher, and this is one's a little tricky to me because I think he's still very, very good. He can be very annoying, but I do think he's one of the more easier characters to counter when you start to understand how he works. So I'm going to put him in B tier. Again, that might be lower than you see him on a lot of different tier lists, but I would personally rank all of these other duelists above him. And because of that, I don't want to, again, if everyone's A tier, is everyone really A tier? And so that's the question I'm asking. If we see Rocket get buffed to where he is up in S or A tier and he's used all the time, you will probably see Punisher rise up the ranks as well. But a big part of this game is the team up abilities, and when one of the characters in that team up is not doing as well as others, that's why I think he falls down the list a little bit. And so again, Punisher is very, very good. His turret can be insanely oppressive. His ultimate can be very good. But again, there's a lot of situations where you can just walk back out of sight. You can shoot him down, shoot him out of his ultimate. You can also block some of the damage. So I do think it is counterable to a degree. And while he's easy to use, I don't think he's a bad character. I just think there's others on this list that are better at this time. Thor. I think Thor is A tier and better than Groot or Captain America. Is that crazy to say? I don't know. I think he's right around there. I know a lot of people like Groot better. I think personally, Thor is not able to block as much damage, obviously, but his damage output and his ability to get deep into the enemy team without having to dive is very valuable. He can get kills on strategists from range with his abilities. He can get into and out of danger. He can use his abilities to essentially keep them constantly up if he's using them correctly. And because of that, I think he's very, very good. He's one of my favorite tanks to use. I think in the right hands is absolutely insane. But he's another character who I think you need a good healer to help you out a bit. You are benefiting if you have a shield tank or another tank that is able to take the pressure off you so you're not getting targeted as much. But I think his damage outweighs that. His ultimate is fine. It is more scary than effective at times for a lot of players, it seems. But I think he's very, very good and probably one of my favorite tanks to play just because of that pure fun factor. But you cannot solo tank with him very well in most situations. And he is reliant a bit on having the right team comp, which is why he drops down. Venom. I think personally Venom is worse than Penny Parker. People might disagree with this. I don't really mind that. And I think partially it's because Penny and Spider-Man are not that great, so the team up doesn't get a huge benefit. But I also think as a character in the game right now, there's just better tanks. I would pick any of the other tanks above him, including Captain America. And that's kind of crazy to think about, but I do think he is a character who can dive the back line, can escape with his life, can be very, very annoying, can do some pretty decent damage, but it's all situational to a degree that I don't find to be effective enough to be worth a pick in most team compositions compared to what others do. And if you don't have Hulk being banned at your rank, then you're probably better off running Hulk in the situations where you would consider running Venom. And so that's why he's got the most like for like tank comparison. And so because of that, he drops down quite a bit just because of how good Hulk is this season. Then we have Winter Soldier. Winter Soldier is very good. I think he's really, really good. I think he's better than Punisher. So he's going to be an A tier character. And I think he just can be really good in the right team setup. Like I said, if Rocket gets a buff, he might vault up the list quite a bit. I think he's very valuable across multiple situations. He's got a lot of interesting abilities. His team up is insane when it's used correctly and against in the right situation. But at the end of the day, I think the characters ahead of him on this list are just better. Actually, looking at this though, I'm probably gonna drop Black Panther back down to there because I just personally think that Winter Soldier is better, and I'm just that's just a judgment call that I want to make. But ultimately, if I look at Winter Soldier, would I rather have a good Winter Soldier or a good Hawkeye? A good Winter Soldier, good Namor, good Star-Lord, good Psylocke? And the answer is almost always one of those other characters, depending on the situation. But I think he's very good and one of those characters who I'm never mad to see one on my team. Wolverine. I think he's the best B tier character on the list. And while I think the pendulum has shifted with him quite a bit, he went from being considered one of the worst characters in the game to then people were like, oh wait, maybe he's one of the best characters in the game, to now I think he is one of the most counterable characters in the game, but he also puts his team in a good position to force the enemy team to run a certain composition. What I mean by that is if the enemy team is running 2 tanks, 2 vanguards, he can take advantage of that unless they have a setup that he's not able to capture all the time. But he can dish out a ton of damage to those vanguards pretty consistently. He is the one character who is essentially holding back the GOATS meta, which is 3 vanguards, 3 strategists. And so because of that, he definitely deserves some plaudits. I do think people have begun to overplay him to a degree in the wrong team composition. Like if you are playing against an enemy team that only has 1 tank and they are able to survive when you're trying to capture him, he will provide so much less value than a lot of other characters on this list, including a Psylocke or Star-Lord or somebody like that. If you have him just because he's melee only, unable to get to the tanks because he's getting melted, or unable to get to the enemy back line essentially, then he's really, really gonna struggle. And that's why I think he settles right there in B tier. He is, just like Squirrel Girl, in my opinion, a good, and Penny Parker as well, a valuable pick in the right circumstances if you are facing against certain team compositions. But there's times and places to play him, and because he's not universally good, he's going to be right there at the B tier. So that's going to be my tier list. Let me know what you agree or disagree with. Again, I think the rankings of the A through D are somewhat subjective. I only put Scarlet Witch down here because I feel like she is clearly the worst character in the game right now, and I wanted that delineation. Whereas if I were to delete D and put her up in the C, that would probably be fine as well, just because, again, she's not unusable. There's certain places in the game where she can be extremely effective, but at the end of the day, her fall off is much worse than any other character in the game, in my opinion. And then the rest of the tier list, I think, looks pretty solid. Maybe some minor quibbles here and there if you want to break it down, but let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Like the video as always. My name is JoPa. Have a good one. I'll catch you all later.